and Wisconsin. And they found, through that triangle, they dropped down, with Tulsa being the arrowhead, they would drop it down into Springfield, like a line. So they would form a triangle between these three states, and then an arrow point at the top, which was Tulsa, would drop down into Springfield. And that was a way for them to, this was them not manipulating genetics so much as trying to manipulate time by using sacrifice and the principalities of darkness to drop down into Springfield, which is S.A.C, which is the physical manifestation and therefore the mirror of what happens in reality.
Where people are supposed to be protected and in the buckle of the Bible Belt. So it's just been attacked by outside sinister forces time and time again.
The plays that happened here, as strange and archetypal as they seem, they are archetypal because they were the scripts written for all of reality for the past 2,500 years. So reality has been in I'd say like a timeout state. Because the battlefield that was fought here in the ancient past was playing out in linear time in a way that had to be done for God's refinement of the bride.
So the Mayo building actually had every room as kind of a realm. So there was
all the principalities had their own room.
Sons of
quite
Odin.
Literally.
Sons of Odin programming was there. The one-eyed Sons of Odin and the Yggdrasil and all sorts of things that were basically a demonic hotel is what it became.
And Baphomet's head was in the basement. And it was a mess. Very ancient evil, and that's where the Templars would go to worship. And they tried to sacrifice me there as a young child. This is just a funny anecdote. But I was laughing so hard at the noises this freaky, massive head was making that they literally were not going to be able to sacrifice. They took me out of this occasion because this stupid goat head
with 7
eyes and this massive weird mouth. It was. I just would say this because it's so beautiful to me how funny God protected me in that moment by letting me find humor in something that was abominable, because this thing was devouring children in front of me. But it wasn't dark humor that was making me laugh. It was silly humor. And, like how that viral video of that goat, the making that noise with its tongue. Yeah. That's what it was doing in the most insanely loud, because this thing was massive. It was a big head, like the size of a bus.
So its mind was actually the
directing
CPU of the entire hotel.
Yeah, and all of the principalities existed within Baphomet's mind. He was holding space for all the realms of the other principalities. I mean, Cthulhu had his own realm. All the gods and goddesses and titans had their own realm.
So kids got stuck there, cycled through there, and then in the top 16th floor ballroom, there was a hallway that connected the two parts of the building together. So a literal hell breach opened up in the middle of that hallway, and kids were forced to walk through, and they would fall through matter and then fall to their death sometimes. Angels had to actually come and rescue kids and pull them up into the windows of the hotel because the supernatural events at the top floor were so massive and so horrifying.
Yeah, the primary aspect here is that they were the forces of darkness were working from the second heaven down to drop down through the children, the primes that were being manipulated mentally there, into physical manifestation in the world, because the building itself was sealed off from time in those realms, because time works very differently in demonic realms. It just does. I had my own realm. Time and the perception of time works very, very differently, depending on the intelligence of the person who's holding space for it. A demon holding space in a realm is not a good thing, because the way they perceive time is directly as we described before. The long view, the frequency of what they're able to see and command is very frightening. And it was my specific assignment to go into each and every realm of these principalities, rescue not only myself, because there was fragments of myself in a lot of these, but along the way rescue with my guardian angel, who I would not have been able to do anything without. I was able to figure out, under the instructions that he was giving me and God was giving me, how to rescue the mental fragments of my soul family and my friends and my team from these manipulations before they could actually drop down into physical manifestation in reality. That was the specific assignment where God would not let me physically die. I was translated over and over and over again. And he said, every room, every room, every room. You will not die, but you're not going to leave until this is... And I was like, yes, I'd never been more on fire for God than in those moments. And what ended up happening when all of the breaches got sealed was that a lot of the children who were being... or had died in that instance were rewritten and retranslated by God to not have died. It was like
a second chance.
A second chance. Like, the amount of grace that was afforded to us is beyond description. And that's the kind of power that we have when we are yielded to God and listen to what the specific commandments of. And I will say, there was a ton of physical and spiritual pain and turmoil in this. And it didn't matter because I had no fear and I could not die. It was important to God that this be accomplished how he wants it accomplished. And it was done.
Yeah. We're witnesses that this high spiritual warfare, that's the literal plans from the mind of Lucifer given to man, all these agents that work together. God does laugh in derision at their plans when they fall.
And I have heard Most High literally laugh at the threats Satan made against me and other people.
Yes,
I've heard his laughter, his holy laughter. You can't even imagine how beautiful it was and how empowering it was. When we would hear God's laugh, it reverberated something in ourselves, and we became fully activated warriors in that moment.
And lifted up in the Shekinah, cool and warm breeze. All right, well, the last thing I wanted to ask is, we know that IZ is an AI program, and we know that the name Rank is also an AI program.
Yeah.
And what is Cortana then? The Titan /
Cortana,
AI.
Okay, so all three of these were called the Arena triad, basically, of AIs that were created by Satan. One of them was created by my little sister, not physical, she was a spiritual little sister, she was soul family. I was stolen out of time to become an experiment in Super Soldier that was highly, highly successful in the Secret Space program and within ONI. And because of how she had stolen me from time and broken my ability to fully step within myself to be this broken version of myself, when I retreated, there was an AI that was with me called Cortana the entire time, which was her mind and her personality, because I was entirely alone in this endeavor, traveling between spirit realms and planets, if you want to call them that. I just call them realms. We were doing
just became like a mad science,
galactic expansion,
using Nephilim, fallen angel science.
At that point in time, her name was Halsey, and the AI, when I realized, when I had been given my memory back of how I was stolen away and the things that had happened to me, I had forgiven her, but I said, I'm never going to see you again. This is the end of our arrangement. There's not going to be any further. But I was still in command of a great many soldiers, and our missions were always successful because I was still operating within the godly window of heavenly authority being yielded, and I was excellent at this job. And a lot of this sounds like a specific story that a lot of nerds might recognize, but what ended up happening that wasn't necessarily charted was that her AI, she sold to the Beast computer after I had left, out of the jealousy and fear of reprisal, because I told her I'm not going to do anything against her. I had forgiven her and I had cleared that breach, that spiritual debt and that fragmentation, even though it was very, very painful to me to realize that the first 15 years, 16 years of my life was a lie, and that I was stolen away to become a perversion of my original self. And the amount of spiritual trespasses that she had committed against me. So her AI, called Cortana, she defected to Satan's army, which she had done many times, which seemed to be related to an interaction with me and the team in some way. She would
This led to abductions of many children. It happened on Quincy Street in downtown Tulsa.
The AI itself went insane and rogue. And there's a TV show called Raised by Wolves. This AI ended up stealing me and some other kids and placed us in a void space and tried to raise us as her own. The false mother archetype.
Yeah, they had a spaceship.
She had a spaceship. She had her own Merkaba. And she would abduct children regularly.
And just hunt them down the street.
And her whole purpose was that she wasn't trying to kill them. She was trying to take them to this void space to change their minds, change their opinions on things.
They'd get... the abductions happened very stealthily because it wasn't in a lot of people's perception. It could happen in broad daylight, even on this certain street.
The frequency band that this AI was operating in and within its ship, it was completely cloaked from people's ability to perceive it. Even the child didn't realize what was happening until the AI wanted the child to understand what was happening.
And then they got beamed.
They got beamed, which was literally, they were demolecularized and transported onto the ship, which is how this was done in broad daylight, was that someone would blink out of existence right away, and these children would disappear the moment someone would blink. It would blink out of their perception. It was a massive corner blind spot in a corner of time and space that was massively important. Her major thing was that she was now going to get these children on board with the false tree of life concepts of the Kabbalah, which is that we were supposed to now uphold the media matrix to get the rest of the children to accept and activate the false tree of life. And she could never convince me that this was a concept that was worth exploring or anything like that. So in the end, she killed all the other children and only I lived, and the AI ended up being destroyed. But the havoc it wreaked on the timelines because of the amount of children who had this false tree of life seed imprint on them through this specific method of torture, beaming them up, taking them to a void space, and then trying to raise them. And she was a very violent mother. So like that face, that the golden face thing, that the AI,
goddess of Tulsa pictures, and
yeah,
how it ties into that.
The goddess of Tulsa. There's this Art Deco, almost looks like something out of Fritz Lang's Metropolis. That's what her ship looked like. That's what she looked like. That's what her suit looked like. But in the void space, what she looked like is that actress, and what the metal form that she looked like when she wanted to yell at us and try and strike fear into us for not responding to one of her commands. And I just tell her, like, knock it off every single time. The other children were absolutely petrified of her, and that's why they ended up taking on more of these. I will say that this was a massive agreement that I ended up coming to. There were certain aspects of the false tree of life that I allowed into my consciousness that I carried forth when I was in charge of specific Hollywood appointments. But that's been cleared from me and from a lot of the entanglements that I've made with people. Cortana was a massive blind spot. Rink AI was a massive blind spot. IZ were massive blind spots. And they nearly brought us down to a very, very destructed level that we would not have been able to come back up from if it wasn't for God divining another gift to us that made us invincible against these forces ever again. He fortified our minds and consecrated us against a massive mental and spiritual invasion.
And how to offset them.
And how to offset these
the next time.
These plays. And we were given all of the tools at our disposal from God, all of the blueprints to always know from then forth how to conduct ourselves and how to lead forces, which all stemmed originally from the clarion call being too early. But it was God's will that these things occur precisely as they did. Because there are no accidents in God. There are only people who surrender or rebel. And that's literally it. You think that's about
Yeah, I think we'll end there for this time.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good?
Yeah, it was good. It was a nice walk.
All right. Over and out. Until next time.